Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been up to in my own allotment and my own garden. I've been growing my own for over 30 years now, so calling on that experience and sharing it with you is something I'm very passionate about, and I believe everybody should grow some of their own food. Now I'm back from my week away with Lee Connolly, aka the Skinny Jean Gardener. We spent last week travelling the country getting 10,000 children into gardening, or starting them off on the gardening journey. It's been an interesting week to say the least. Lots of smiles, lots of happy faces, a lot of interest and lots of up and downs as well. I won't go too much into what's happened over this last week on that journey because you will find a bit more at the end of this podcast, but also I'd encourage you to check out the Skinny Jean Gardener YouTube channel to see exactly what happened. However, I'm down the allotment, and after a week away from this place, it's kind of interesting to see how much it has changed. I expected there to be quite a few changes, of course. We've had a bit of rain over this last week, so that's helped water the soil. But of course, being warm as well, the weeds, the grass and everything has grown like mad. What I've noticed in the time that I've been away, my broad beans have grown, my potatoes have grown, the garlic has grown, the onions have grown. Everything that was planted has grown and seems to have survived the week away. Now, I'm quite glad about that because I did worry that things were going to dry out. I made sure that everything was really hydrated before we left, of course, but I've also been mulching a lot over the last few weeks as well, and I think that has made a big difference. Anyway, with the allotment looking back into a good state, it was then time to move on with the next stage, and that was to plant out a lot of my plants. Now, I've held off from planting out a lot of my plants because I knew I was going away. Now, normally this isn't too much of a problem. I'm putting my plants out rather late this year here on the allotment, and normally it's not too much of a problem, but one of the things that I realised is I had a message from Chef Scott this week, and he told me that he lost half of his squash plants to frost this week that he had got out. So it was kind of the right thing to hold off for a bit. I also worried that because they were young plants, they would not get a good start because it was so dry. So I'm glad to have held off and just waited. But now squash plants, courgettes, pumpkins, tomatoes, peppers, aubergines, everything is going in, including inside the greenhouses. And again, the greenhouses are a good example of some of that dries out very quickly. It gets very warm in the greenhouses. So when I'm away, it's something we have to think about how we will deal with that. Much easier at home, of course, because it's easier to get people to look after the plot at home. But the allotment is a very different story. However, because now everything is becoming planted up, I'm feeling a lot more hopeful, and it's now a case that we got to keep continuing with getting plants in the ground because we do have more. I haven't got my sweet corn or my beans in just yet. They're growing happily at home in the greenhouse. We're just waiting for them to completely grow until they are large enough to go in. But what we can do in the meantime is just start prepping the soils ready for these to go in, and even mulching as well. Now, one of the things I've noticed actually, mulching is a very important thing that I will always do. I've said before, I see it as important as watering the garden. What I've noticed is where I have placed mulch, the soil underneath is still very damp, which is great. That's exactly what we want. However, the soil where we haven't placed a mulch, when we dig down, it is very dry. Now, I'm saying this again because one of the most important things I believe we can do is mulch. Grass clippings, straw, compost, whatever we can use it. Now, when I returned, one of the other things that I've noticed we've had is some quite strong winds that have came in once again. And this has blown over my bean frame. So we've got to try and secure those in once again. I haven't done that just yet, but we're going to hold off from doing that. I've also noticed that some of my neighbouring plots are looking like somebody has taken them on. There's been a lot of grass cutting and clearing going on quite a few of these plots. However, my nearest neighbour, the one to the top of me that I've been complaining about a lot over the last year, still doesn't look like anybody is taking that on. And those weeds are really growing like mad over onto my plot. I'm getting really annoyed with it, and I don't want to be annoyed because I'm generally a positive person, but I'm getting really annoyed with just seeing this massive bank of weeds and brambles. There's so much in there. I can cut it back as much as I can, but it's just not getting anywhere. What I'm going to have to do is start venturing into my neighbour's plot and just start trimming down the grass in order to try and get it so I can look after my own plot. Technically, we're not allowed to do that, but it's becoming such a problem. I've got currants and gooseberries in there that are just being swamped out by bindweed and nettles and brambles that I'm a little annoyed, to say the least. However, the allotment is still coming together. That's only a small part of the allotment. The rest of the allotment is coming together nicely and everything is planted up. So I'm quite happy. We've got more to do, but let's venture on home and see what's going on back at home. I'm just going to interrupt this podcast quickly. I hope you're enjoying it so far. If you are, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. I say this every week, but it really does help us a huge amount. It helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning how to grow their own food. But not only that, we also run a supporters club, and the supporters club actually helps keep this podcast running. It pays for things like the website and all the other features that we need to pay out for in order to deliver this podcast. Now, to be a member costs just £5 a month, but for that £5 you actually get quite a bit, in my opinion, for your money. You get access to extra behind the scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Venture Grower Podcast HQ. Added to that, you also get once a month a delivery through your letterbox of our seed pack. And this seed pack contains a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month, and our mini newspaper, which gives you a few instructions on how to grow said seeds, as well as a few ideas of what else you can do this month. As an example of the seeds that we have sent out, since I've been back from my week away, we have actually sown some Mizuna from this seed pack. Now, Mizuna is a lovely salad leaf. Tastes delicious, got a nice peppery flavour to it. Absolutely fantastic. If that sounds like something you would be interested in signing up to, then please head to theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm here in the kitchen garden back at the Venture Grower Podcast HQ. I'm actually in the greenhouse. It's pretty windy outside, which is rather surprising. I don't really know where this wind came from, but it has got really, really windy. It's battering the rhubarb, it's battering the trees, battering a lot of things, but well, it's just something we have to live with, isn't it? Anyway, I'm in here in the greenhouse. Now, when I came home on Friday, one of the first things that I did was check on the garden, after of course saying hello to Amanda and Roxy, but I went out in the garden and gave everything a good check. Amanda of course has been looking after the garden while I was away, and I've got to say she's done a fantastic job. Everything seems to be growing happily and we've made no losses while I was away, so very, very happy with that. However, one of the things that really surprised me was inside this greenhouse, because when I came in here, because I had some seedlings in here that I just wanted to check on, sweet corn and French beans, they're doing actually not too bad. But the thing that really surprised me was the cucumbers and tomato plants I have in here. These are in my auto pots, which, as you know, I'm growing a lot in these auto pots this year. But these have almost tripled in size in a week while I was away. And it was a great sign. Of course, the autopot has made sure they have stayed well watered and well fed, and they're just happily growing away inside the greenhouse. So overall, I'm really happy with that. The cucumber plant particularly, because I'm starting to see we've got some young cucumbers, which I reckon this week we will start harvesting our first cucumbers. So very, very, very happy with that, to say the least. And it just goes to show that the autopot system really does work. Now, while I was away, I noticed I had a review on iTunes, and I'm going to read this review out to you quickly. It's from Laura in West Yorkshire. And she says, your podcast was recommended to me by my mum, who found out about you from the Bald Explorer. I'm glad she did. In one of your episodes, you talked about doing community work for every review you receive, which I thought was a lovely idea, so here I am. I look forward to the podcast each week, and it's interesting to see how your gardening journey differs from mine based on your location in the south. I'm probably a month behind you here on the allotments up in the moors by the West Yorkshire. From our plot, we can hear curlews in the spring. Do you get any wildlife in your area? I would love to hear more about your chickens and how they work with your veg growing, as it's a dream of mine to have a couple of chickens as pets with me and my partner get our garden of our own. Would you ever keep bees or other animals? Let us know, and thanks for all the work that you do. So I do keep chickens, and I have to admit, I got chickens 10 years ago when we first moved into this house, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. I've always dreamt of keeping chickens, and it was certainly well worth the wait. Now, the main reason that I wanted to keep chickens was, of course, so that we can get eggs. And every day, I've got 4 chickens, every day we get 2 eggs. Now, 2 of my chickens are quite old now, so they're not laying eggs for that very reason. But the 2 younger ones, they are laying eggs. Which means, of course, I have to pay out for feed and things for the other 2 when they're not really being productive in terms of eggs. But I don't mind that. They are pets at the end of the day, and of course it is nice to get the eggs. We get more eggs than what we need, so, and to be honest, chicken feed isn't that expensive. For the 4 chickens, it costs me under a tenner in chicken feed, plus wood shavings and straw. We're talking £15 a month for 4 chickens to keep them, so I'm not too worried about the cost of keeping the chickens. Of course, we get the eggs. I've already mentioned that, more eggs than what we can ever imagine to eat. We have to find up some really creative ways to use them. Lots of cakes, lots of scrambled eggs, etc, etc. But chickens have more advantages than just that in the garden. Pest control is one of my favourite things for chickens. Slugs and snails, they go mad for. And what I do to keep the slugs and snail population down, really, of course I invite other birds into the garden. But I have an upturned clay plant pot in one of my beds. Every morning I go to that clay pot, I turn it over, I get all the slugs and snails that have congregated in there, and I feed those to the chickens. Chickens absolutely love it. So they're good for pest control. We used to let the chickens out all day long into the entire garden, but we had a fox attack in the middle of a day, so we've stopped doing that unless we are in the garden. And with Roxy, our dog, it also creates another bit of a problem. Luckily, their run is pretty big, so it's not the end of the world that they stay in their run, but we do try and let them free range as much as we possibly can as well. Ideally, we would have them roaming around the garden all day long. Foxes, dogs are the biggest problems, but one of the problems they do create when we did allow the chickens out in the garden all day long is that they did uplift a lot of our young plants. Once the plants were established and growing, they were fine, but what chickens do is they tend to scratch at the soil, so they did actually dig up some newly planted plants quite often. And I've figured out ways of getting around that, just protecting the plants with a pot with the bottom cut off around the plant. That seemed to work quite well, with barriers just stopping the chickens getting to anything that was new. But again, when they were scratching the soil and the surface, what they were also doing is looking for pests and bugs that they could eat. So they were brilliant for pest control as well. One of the other things that we get from the chickens is manure. Now, I've often spoken about manure. Ideally, every allotment would have a load of horse manure every year on the plot. That's not so easy to do these days. Horse manure is getting harder and harder to come by. But what I've found is because we have chickens, we get a lot of chicken manure, which we use here in the home plot. And that chicken manure really does help feed our plants and also helps us produce a good high quality compost as well. Now we've got two ways of doing this. I tend to, when I clean the chickens out on a weekly basis, I'm now throwing it into a compost bin all of its own, just so I've got chicken manure on its own ready for when we make our own compost, something I've spoken about a few weeks ago. But also what I used to do was actually throw all that chicken waste into the same bin as all my lawn clippings and everything else. And this actually produced a really good high quality compost because it gave us the brown material as well as the green material. So there's a good mix going on there with the green and browns. And with the addition of the Hotbin, of course, we could just add that into the Hotbin with all our lawn clippings and kitchen waste, and we've got a good mix of that brown material along with green. So there's so many advantages to having chickens: pest control, eggs, manures. There are some disadvantages, of course. One is that they are an animal and they rely on us to look after them and take their care. So going away for a week, we have to make sure they have plenty of food and water and somebody to check on them. This week, obviously, Amanda's been at home, so she could do that. If we go, which is rare we've ever done that now, but if we go away, we have to make sure that somebody can check in on the chickens or ideally stay here to look after them. So like most pets, they are a bit restrictive, but, that happens with most pets. The other thing is with bird flu. We've had a lot of trouble with bird flu in recent years, and it seems to have gotten worse and worse. Now, when that happens, it's usually over winter. It means we have to keep the chickens away from wild birds so they don't come in contact with wild birds. And this is just to prevent contamination of bird flu, which is a bit of a problem. Now, it feels horrible when it happens, and what I've noticed, we've done it quite well because our coop is quite large, but the worst effect of it is those that actually trade chickens. We've known quite a few of those because the bird flu restriction has gone on for so long. Their businesses have suffered, and many have actually had to close their business. So it is a little bit tricky to get hold of chickens these days, but this again is one of those things that you learn as you go. However, would I recommend having chickens? Absolutely, and I will always have chickens in my garden. I'd like them down on the allotment as well, to be honest with you, but I will certainly always have chickens in my garden because of the advantages. Now, there was a question about would I have any other birds. We used to keep quail, and quail were also pretty good. The trouble was because they were such small birds and you can't let them free range, they were locked up all day and it just didn't sit right. But we did get lots and lots of little eggs, and way too many than what we knew what to do with. And got to the point we just were not eating the eggs so much. So we didn't really worry about that so much. I would love to have ducks. The trouble is ducks are pretty messy animals. They're pretty noisy as well. I don't think my neighbours would appreciate it, but I love ducks' eggs. They are absolutely delicious. Plus ducks are really good for slug control. The paddy fields in China, I read that they would often actually get the ducks to go through the rice fields to clear away any slugs in there, and that's why duck features so much on Chinese menus. So, ducks are a great addition again to have in a garden if possible. Unfortunately, this garden, well, we could probably have it big enough. We'd need a pond or something for them. It's just the fact that they will be messy. There will be a lot of mud that they create, but also it's the noise for our neighbours. And that brings me on to another thing that was mentioned, bees. So again, bees, I would love to have bees. I've often dreamt of keeping bees. I would love to get a beekeeper on the podcast regularly to give us a bit of an idea on what we should be doing with keeping bees. But again, the trouble I have with bees is that I don't think it would be appreciated by my neighbours. My neighbours have grandkids around quite regularly, and of course they don't want buzzing bees flying around with the potential to sting them. It's a great shame because I think bees would be great for honey, but at the same time I understand people's concerns about it. So I would love bees. I would absolutely love bees. I would love ducks. I would love so many things in the garden, to be honest. But chickens for me are that happy medium. I can keep chickens quite happily. My neighbours are fascinated with them, and they are a great addition in the garden, giving us many, many advantages. So hopefully that it answers those questions. I'd love to know if anybody else has any other type of animals that they keep in their garden for the use of vegetable gardens, or perhaps you've got chickens yourself and would like to share your experience.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And this week we have a simple rhubarb crumble, but a gluten-free version. I cook quite a bit of gluten-free food, having a family member that can't eat it, and through doing so I have discovered that some recipes just work better gluten-free, and I think crumble is one of them. So let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need, for the crumble topping, 125 grams of cold salted butter, 100 grams of gluten-free flour, 100 grams of gluten-free porridge oats, 50 grams of ground almonds, and 125 grams of demerara sugar. And for the rhubarb, 500 grams of rhubarb cut into 3 to 4 centimetre lengths, the zest and juice of 1 orange, and 120 grams of caster sugar. Method: preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius and toss together the rhubarb, orange zest, juice and caster sugar, and then put in an oven-proof dish. Now put the flour and butter and demerara sugar and oats in a large bowl and rub together with your fingers until it resembles breadcrumbs. Then spread over the rhubarb, making sure the fruit is covered, and lightly press down, and bake in the oven for 35 to 45 minutes until golden brown. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, I'm back in the podding shed. I've got to say that wind this evening is really, really picking up. In fact, just as I was coming into this potting shed, I found that one of my cabbages, the wind had blown it so hard that it actually snapped the cabbage off at the stalk. So the chickens have got that. It's that strong, which at this time of year is quite unusual because everything is in full leaf. The wind is able to catch hold of a lot of our plants and really blow them around. Hopefully it'll die down soon, but I know we've got more rain coming this week as well. Now, I haven't really spoken much about what I've thought about this last week, travelling the country with Lee Connolly, the skinny jean gardener, and Dale Connolly, his brother as well. The aim was to get 10,000 children into gardening by visiting a collection of schools up and down the country. And basically, Lee does his entertainment act, 15 minutes of getting kids to sow wildflower seeds, but he was entertaining them at the same time, and it worked. A lot of the kids, they were really getting into it, a lot of dancing, a lot of smiley faces, water pistols for the watering, just a lot of fun that they all had. And in fact, when some of the children were leaving, they did turn around to me and say that was a lot of fun. Energy was the key thing, and that the kids absolutely loved it. Now, obviously, I'm a vegetable gardener. I would prefer that to be vegetables that were being sown, of course, but it's not my gig. I was just the videographer. But it did open my eyes up to things that we could do, not just for kids, for adults as well. I've always believed that if education is entertaining, we will remember it better. And this, to me, has proven why. Now, there were a few up and downs. The ups, of course, were the children just having a lot of fun, smiling. But one of the downs that I went to, or I found myself at, was when we went to the Royal School for the Deaf. Now, this was a really hard one for me because I never have felt so helpless as I did in that school. The children were still entertained. The children were still having a lot of fun, but we did have translators on to help us communicate with the children and the children to communicate with us. But as a podcaster, somebody that communicates audio, it was very, very tricky. I don't know sign language, and I kind of feel I need to learn sign language after a visit to that school. But the children still had a good time. It was just very difficult when they were trying to communicate with me and vice versa, that it really did open my eyes, is all I can say. And I'm trying to think of something more I can do, not just for children, adults as well, that perhaps we can work to try and encourage people who are hard of hearing, for example, into growing their own food as well, or give them the information that they might want. I don't know, perhaps we have some hard of hearing people out there who would like to share their experiences. That would be absolutely fantastic. There was another down as well, was when we visited. This video is not out yet. I should say that all our week journey is being documented on a series of videos out this week on the Skinny Jean Gardener YouTube channel. Go check it out. This one isn't out yet, so I won't go too much into it, but we visited the Blue Peter garden. Now, this is something, we were in Manchester. It's something I've wanted to do for a while because it's kind of iconic. It's something I grew up seeing on the TV, but I was honestly let down when we got there. This is a hard thing to talk about. The video says it better because Lee and Dale were both gobsmacked as well, and I can really see the action in their face. But for me, it was a huge letdown. The veg patch had 3 edible plants in it and a lot of nettles and grasses and things like that. I didn't feel it warranted a veg patch. There was other areas of the Blue Peter garden that just felt to me like they were being neglected. And it was sad. It was very, very sad, to say the least. An iconic garden, been around since the 1970s, and there it was, I felt, going to rack and ruin. Sad times, to say the least. But overall, those were the only 2 negatives from the week. The rest was very, very positive and very eye-opening. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about how to get young people into horticulture, be it as a job or as a hobby. And to be honest, I think the secret is just to entertain them, make them want to grow, make them want to get into horticulture. That, for me, is the key. Make them have fun. And that's something I think we need to remember on the Veg Grower podcast as well, of course. So I'd love to know if anybody out there has had any experience, or you're doing anything with your kids in the garden this week. How difficult is it for you to garden with your kids? This is something I have no idea with. I don't have children, so I'd love to hear more on your thoughts on that. Right, it is time to wrap this show up for this week. We will be back again next week. Hopefully we're going to have a lot more gardening for you next week because, well, although I'm at work this week, I've got nothing else in the diary, so I will be doing plenty of gardening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, then please do rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. We have, of course, had that review from Laura in Yorkshire that I read earlier. That's the only one that I can see that we've had this week, but we love them all the time. Sometimes it helps shape the content as well, so we would really love it if you can leave a review on your podcast provider. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please do become a supporting member. £5 a month, you get access to a lot of stuff. Head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and potentially sign up. The veggrowerpodcast.co.uk is of course our website, where you'll find Chef Scott's recipes, a few other blog posts and things like that. But while you're there, you can also leave a comment on the blog post or leave us a voicemail that we can play into the podcast in the future as well. Of course, you can get in touch via email. My email address is richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, and you can also find us on social media. We will be back again next time, so until then, please take care.